We had 30 minutes to solve 30 questions of verbal reasoning, 20 questions were passage based, and 10 one liners based on cause and effect type questions. So, how were these questions? How many questions were you able to attempt, and what did you think about the level of difficulty? Tough, difficult, okay. Some were tricky, medium, difficult, okay. So, English is something which you have been finding a bit easy, but when it comes to verbal reasoning, hardly anybody, only one or two seem to think that it was easy, when most of are in the range of moderate to difficult. Okay. Don't worry, we will practice more of such questions. We will practice more of such questions so that we get a good grasp over how to solve them. Right? So let's take a look at each of these questions and see what should have been the answers, right? And what could have been a decent score for this section. Starting with the first one, right? Now, in the first one also, as is usual, I'll first read the question. A reader who is neither a millionaire nor in top management would be most likely to act in accordance with the advertisement's suggestion if he or she drew which of the following questionable conclusions invited by the advertisements. So basically, they are asking that what is the advertising suggesting which a reader who is not a millionaire, who is not in top management, is still likely to follow. Okay. So the passage says nearly 1 in 3 subscribers to Financial Forecaster is a millionaire, and over half are in top management. Shouldn't you subscribe to Financial Forecaster? So basically, they are trying to suggest that Financial Forecaster magazine subscribe करने के कारण क्या हैं? They say that 1 in 3 subscribers who subscribe to Financial Forecaster magazine is a millionaire. Half of them are top management. So if they are saying that this is the reason because of which you should also subscribe to Financial Forecaster magazine, then obviously they are trying to suggest that it is Financial Forecaster magazine who is helping people to either become a millionaire or to be a part of top management, right? They are using this statistic as advertising. So if they are saying this as statistic for purchasing and reading the magazine, that means they're trying to suggest that if you purchase and read our magazine, you will become a millionaire or you will be a part of top management. Look at the options. First one says among finance related periodical, Financial Forecaster provides the most detailed financial information. Not exactly. Top managers cannot do their jobs properly without reading it. No, nothing to do with millionaires. The advertisement is placed where those who will be likely to read it are millionaires. No. The subscribers mentioned were helped to become millionaires or join top management by reading Financial Forecaster. This is exactly what they are trying to do. Only those who will in fact become millionaires or top managers will read. No, actually they are trying to suggest that those who read the advertisement, in fact, or those who read the magazine will become millionaires. If you are already a millionaire or top manager, why do I want you to read it by saying it, right? I'm trying to attract customers by giving them an incentive. So the best possible option is definitely D. Relatively simple example, the best possible option in this is definitely D. Right? Next one. Now, two questions are based on this. Right? The first question, first we'll read the question and then the passage. The author's method of attacking the charges of certain opponent of the new deficit reduction law is. They're asking how is the author attacking the charges? What method is he using? Okay. Passage. Contrary to the charges made by some of its opponents, the provisions of the new deficit reduction law for indiscriminate cuts in the federal budget are justified. Opponents should remember that the New Deal pulled this country out of great economic troubles, even though some of its programs were later found to be unconstitutional. He's saying that this is actually justified, right? Some people are attacking the new law. The author is saying that this law is actually justified. What is he saying? He's saying that you should remember that when the New Deal pulled the country out of economic troubles, although some of the programs were unconstitutional, even though the New Deal pulled the country out of great economic troubles. So, what is he doing? Is he attacking the character of the opponent? No, he has said nothing about the character. Is he implying an analogy between the law and some New Deal program? Yes, he's saying the New Deal program had benefits and he's trying to compare. So B is possible. C says, point out that the opponent's claims imply a dilemma. Dilemma is you're confused between two things. He's not talking about any confusion. C is not my answer. D says, show that the opponent's reasoning leads to absurd conclusion. He is not showing any absurd conclusion. Or show that the New Deal also called for indiscriminate cuts in the budget. He never talks about the relationship between New Deal and budget. So definitely B is my answer here. He is giving an analogy, a comparison between the current deficit reduction law and something called New Deal. He says, although New Deal was unconstitutional, it still helped the country. So he's trying to compare the New Deal with the current law, which means he is giving an analogy. So definitely B. Based on the same passage, the third one, here it says the opponents could effectively defend their position against the author's strategy by pointing out. Now, the author has tried to defend the law, saying that it is compared with the New Deal. Now, how can the enemies attack what the author is saying, or rather defend their own position now? Now, expertise, do they point out the expertise of those opposing the law is outstanding? It is the opponents themselves are opposing it. Saying that my expertise is great is not a great way of proving your point. B. The lack of justification for the new law does not imply that those who drew it were either inept or immoral. By attacking the morality of the people, you cannot justify anything. Right? Don't attack the people, attack logic. So B cannot be my answer. C says the practical application of new law will not entail indiscriminate budget cuts. Sort of, but it does not give a clear defense to them. D, because the attack is comparison with the New Deal. This does not talk anything about New Deal. It's only comparing, it's talking about the new law. But the explanation about the New Deal which the author gave, it is not attacking it. D says economic troubles present at the time of the New Deal were equal in severity to those of the present law. This though in fact weakens their position. If the economic troubles during the New Deal were same as current times, then the effect of the New Deal will be the same as the current law, which means actually the author is true. So this is false because they have to attack the author. E says the fact that certain flawed programs or laws have improved the economy does not prove that every such program can do so. The author is trying to say that because one program called the New Deal was good, so this program will also be good. The defense, the attack, this can be attacked by saying one example cannot make a general theory. Just because one example of a law proved to be successful, you cannot use this to say every law will be successful. Much better explanation than C. So E will be a better argument. Right? Correct? Yes, Aditya rightly says just because one is good, so saying that everything else will also be good is actually a bad comparison. You cannot make a generalized statement from one specific example. Correct, Aditya? Exactly. So, Shubhankar, which part? Not entail क्या? कहाँ पे not entail? C. Entail, not entail means what? Will not involve. Entail means to involve something or to have. So, if the practical application of the new law will not involve indiscriminate budget cuts, how is that a great defense? Are they attack? See, the author has tried to attack them by comparing it with the New Deal. So, somehow the defense should be, the opponents should talk about the New Deal comparison, right? In C, they are not at all comparing with the New Deal. So, how are they defending against the attack of the author? C is not a defense against the author's attack. The question asks that how will you defend against the author's strategy? The author is comparing with New Deal. So my defense has to involve New Deal, and C does not do that. So C definitely cannot be answered because of that reason. Although it is some sort of a defense, it is not a great defense. E is a much better defense. Right? Okay. Harsha, I didn't get that. Harsha, what was that? Okay. Fine, no issues. Chalo, next one. Which of the following correction of a figure appearing in the passage above, if it were the only correction that needed to be made, would yield a new calculation showing that even incomes below median family income would enable families in Millington to afford Millington's median priced house? You have to make one correction to the numbers. Out of all the numbers, if you correct one number, then it will show that even if the incomes are below median family income, people can still purchase or afford median priced houses. Which number has to be corrected? Okay, let's read the passage. In Millington, a city of 50,000 people, Mercedes Pedrosa, a realtor, calculated that a family with Millington's median family income of $28,000 a year could afford to buy Millington's median priced $77,000 house. This calculation was based on 11.2% mortgage interest rate and on the realtor's assumption that a family could only afford to pay up to 25% of its income for housing. Okay? If the calculation shows that the family can afford to pay up to 25% of its income and the interest rate is 11.2%, then how can a 28,000 annual income wala family afford to buy the house of $77,000? So, if I talk about A, the total population was 45,000. This does not help me in any way. This 45 population size does not help me calculate how families with less than certain income can also afford it. Right? If the annual family income was $27,000, currently it is $28,000. If the annual family income becomes lesser, then how can a family with a lesser income than this able to afford it? So ye to bilkul hi nahi. If the price of the house goes up, then how can a family having less than the average income be able to afford it? Not my answer. If the mortgage interest rate becomes 10% instead of 11.2, then a family which earns less than 28,000 will also be able to afford it. D can be my answer. Now, if families can only afford to pay up to 22%, that means they can pay even less. So then even lesser families cannot afford it. So definitely D is my answer. Mathematical but easy once you understand what is to be done. Did everybody understand it? You don't have to calculate anything. It's logical. Currently they are saying if 28,000 is your annual salary if you are paying at 11.2% rate of interest, and if 77,000 is the price of the house, then you can afford it. Right? Now, out of 28,000, you can pay 25% towards the loan. Did you get these 4 points? Did you understand these 4 points? The 4 numbers? The first number of 50,000 people is useless. Right? 50,000 people, number of people has nothing to do with affordability. So did you understand these 4 numbers first? I'll explain once again. First of all, did you understand if your income is 28,000, if the house is worth 77,000, if you have to pay interest of 11.2%, and if you have to pay, if you can afford only 25% of your salary towards the loan, then you can afford this house. Hardi, ये 4 points समझ में आए? The 4 numbers in the passage. Okay. Now, if instead of 28,000, my income is less, can I afford the house? बाकी सब number same है, but my income is less, then obviously I cannot afford the house. बाकी तीनों number same है, but the price of the house is 80,000. Can I afford it? Everything, all, no, I cannot afford it. Baki 3 numbers are same. Instead of being able to pay 25% of my income, if I can pay only 22% of my income is what? 28,000. So instead of 25% of your total income, if you can afford to pay only 22% of your total income, then can you afford the house? How? See, Ardi, that's the number you are not getting. See, 25% of 28,000 means they can afford to pay $7,000 as the loan amount, EMI, right? Now they're saying instead of 25%, that is instead of 7,000 from the total income, if they can afford to pay only, let's say 6,500, roughly 22%, I'm not calculating the exact value, they cannot afford the EMI of 7,000. If they can afford the EMI of only 6,500 per month, then do you think they will be able to afford? No. But Baki 3 numbers are same, but interest rate instead of 11.2%, they have to pay only 10. तो EMI कम हो गया ना? Automatically EMI कम हो गया. So then they can afford it, because instead of 10%, instead of 11.2% interest payment, they're paying only 10%. Got that? I hope now it is clear. Okay. Next one. Which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the conclusion drawn by the psychological researchers? There is some conclusion, you have to make it strong. Okay. Psychological research indicates that college hockey and football players are more quickly moved to hostility and aggression than are college athletes in non-contact sports, such as swimming. But the researchers' conclusion that contact sports encourage and teach participants to be hostile and aggressive is untenable. Untenable, it cannot be supported. The football and hockey players were probably more hostile and aggressive to start with than the swimmers. The researchers are saying that if you play sports where touching other players is required, then you become a hostile person. Right? In swimming, you don't touch anybody. So swimmers generally are not very angry people. But in hockey and football, where touch happens, they say those sports people are more angry. You have to say that yes, playing such sports actually makes you a hostile person. Okay. Now, first option says the football and hockey players become more hostile and aggressive during the season and remain so during off season, whereas there is no increase in aggressiveness among the swimmers. Season means what? There are particular times of the month when the sports are played, right? जैसे IPL का season होता है, World Cup का season होता है. So this one says that when hockey and football players season comes, that is the time of their games come, they become more aggressive. But during the season of swimmers are not more aggressive. Does this help you prove that it is the actual sport which is making the person aggressive? Quite possible. Yes, if the hockey and football players are actually more hostile and aggressive during the season of the sport, then you can say that it is the sport which is making them aggressive. So A could be my answer. B says football and hockey players but not swimmers were aware at the start of the experiment that they were being tested. Just being aware does not prove that the sport is making you angry. The same psychological research indicated that football and hockey players had great respect for cooperation and team play, whereas swimmers were most concerned with excelling as individuals. C does not tell me anything why they are aggressive. Fourth, research studies were designed to include no college athletes who party blah 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 blah. Does not tell me the reason of aggression. Throughout the United States, more incident of fan violence occur at baseball games than fan violence की तो बात ही नहीं है, sports person के violence की बात है. So obviously A is the best possible answer. A is definitely the best possible answer. That's right, Aditya. During the season, game time increases. So obviously aggression increases. Then it means that it is the contact during the sport which is making them aggressive. Sanskriti, see, Aditya has beautifully put it. During the season, there is more sports being played. More you play, more there is touch. More there is touch, the more aggressive they become, which establishes the relation between touch and the aggression. Now do you get it? Okay. Next one. Which of the following best describes the weak point in Ross's claim on which Julia's response focuses? What is the weakness in Ross's claim? Ross says the profitability of company X restored to private ownership 5 years ago is clear evidence that business will always fare better under private than under public ownership. Julia says wrong. A close look at the records show that X has been profitable since the appointment of a first-class manager, which happened when X was still in the public sector. So Ross is saying that becoming private sector was the reason for profitability. Julia is saying that profitability was there when the appointment of the manager happened, and the appointment of the manager happened when X was still public sector. What exactly is Julia saying? Right? Ross's statement, look at option C. Ross's statement leaves open the possibility that the cause he's saying is making the company public. His statement leaves open the possibility that the cause he cites came after the effect he attributes to it. Right? He says the effect is what? Profitability. He says that when the company became public, then there was profit. But technically, the profits came even before the company became public. And that is the flaw which Julia is pointing out. So definitely C is my answer. Shubhankar, if Julia's argument was not given, if only Ross's argument was given, you could easily have challenged it using A as the answer. That one case cannot give you the argument. But Julia is not attacking that portion. Right? Look at the question. It is asking you which is the weak point in Ross's claim on which Julia's response focuses. Julia's response does not focus on the fact that Ross is only giving one example as the cause and effect. And hence C is a better answer than A. A is in fact definitely not the answer because Julia's argument is not attacking that. Do you understand that, Shubhankar? Fine. Next one. Which of the following conclusions can most properly be drawn from the information? What conclusion can you make? Okay. It says stronger patent laws are needed to protect inventions from being pirated. With that protection, manufacturers would be encouraged to invest in the development of new products and technologies. And such investment frequently results in increase in manufacturers' productivity. पेटेंट लॉ की वजह से इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ेगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट की वजह से प्रोडक्टिविटी बढ़ेगी. सो इन शॉर्ट, पेटेंट लॉस will lead to increase in productivity. As simple as that. E is my answer. If A leads to B and B leads to C, then obviously my conclusion, A leads to C. Patent law encourages investment. Investment encourages productivity. So ultimately, patent law increases productivity. Now, Namra, how do we know that manufacturers will decrease investment in the development of new products unless there are strong patent laws? Right? Manufacturers will invest money if they are protected. But if they are not protected, is it guaranteed that they will decrease the investment? Maybe they will try to they will either keep it same. We don't know. So that cannot be, C cannot be my answer. Protection leads to better productivity, better investment. But no law does not imply no investment or less investment. Okay. Next one. Which of the following best completes the passage? Okay. At large amusement parks, live shows are used very deliberately to influence crowd movement. Lunchtime performance relieves the pressure on park's restaurant. Evening performance have a rather different purpose, to encourage the visitors to stay for supper. So behind this surface divergence in immediate purpose, there is a unified underlying goal. What is that? Utilizing the restaurants at optimal levels. Fine. Ultimately, it is about restaurant. In here whatever strategy is given, the strategy is always for the benefit of the restaurant. Lunchtime performance is to relieve the pressure of restaurant. Evening performance is also to make visitors stay for supper. That means ultimately make the restaurants earn more. So the focus of the argument is of restaurants. It is not about managing lines. It is not about just enhancing revenue. It is not about traffic jams. And it is not about encouraging as many people as possible to eat. Because lunchtime performance mein they want fewer people to go. So it is about optimization, not just increasing it. Because lunchtime method, they are actually trying to reduce the pressure on restaurants. So definitely E is my answer. It is, see, at lunchtime, they are actually trying to make less people eat in restaurants, right? Relieving the pressure means what? If too many people come, that is pressure. So a performance at lunchtime, people will be watching the performance. That means the restaurant will not have as much flow they can manage. So it's not about increasing the revenues. It's about optimizing the level at which restaurant can perform. Right? Yes, Aditya. Did you get that, Shubhankar? If it was only about increasing the revenues, then even at lunch, they will try to fill up the restaurant to the maximum capacity, which they are not doing. Right? Oh, this is EG. James weighs more than Kelly. Lewis weighs more than Mark. Mark is less than Ned. And Kelly and Ned are of the same weight. Then which of the following must also be true? Lewis, I don't know where he stands, right? Lewis can be anywhere here. So Lewis, is he more than Ned? Nah. More than James? I don't know. Is Kelly less than Lewis? I don't know. Is James more than Mark? Definitely. Is Kelly less than Mark? Definitely not. So the only option which I can be which I can be sure about is D. Very easy one this was. This absolutely easy one. No problem at all. Right? The brownie point you score is eliminating Lewis. Yeah. ठीक है? Okay. 10 and 11, both of them based on the same passage. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage? Simple inference. Okay. Partly because of bad weather, but also partly because some major pepper growers have switched to high-priced cocoa. World production of pepper has been running well below worldwide sales for 3 years. Pepper is consecutively in relatively short supply. The price of pepper has soared in response. It is now equal to that of cocoa. Okay. From this, what can I infer? Chalo. First one says pepper is profitable only if it is grown on a large scale. Nah. World consumption of pepper has been unusually high for 3 years. No. World production of pepper will return to, I do not know what will happen, whether it will return or not. Surplus stocks of pepper have been reduced in the past 3 years. Maybe. The profits that growers of pepper have made in the past 3 years have been unprecedented. Unprecedented, I don't know. Maybe they have made profit, but I don't know whether in the past they did not make as much. So although not a great one, the only possible inference here has to be D. Price of pepper has soared in response, which means currently it has soared, but it does not say it has soared for the first time. So saying that the profit is unprecedented, we do not know. It has soared currently because of all this, but I do not know whether this soaring is happening for the first time. So the word unprecedented is not justified here. Unprecedented means something which has never happened before. Yes, they have made a lot of profits, but how do I know that these profits were never made in the past? I only know what is happening in the past 3 years. Before that, whether such profits were made or not, we don't know. So E cannot be my answer. Right. Production of pepper if it is running low, but if there is enough stock, then the price may not change. But production is also low and price is also going up. Then the reasonable inference can be that any excess stock is also reduced. So D is right. So D is definitely right. Yes. Got it? Amanbir, that's exactly right. Surplus stocks is used up. That's why it has been reduced. Correct. And based on the same passage, the next one. Some observers have concluded that the rise in the price of pepper means that the switch by some growers from pepper to cocoa left those growers no better off than if none of them has switched. However, this conclusion is unwarranted. This conclusion is wrong because it can be inferred to be likely that what? If growers of pepper switched to cocoa, but they did not get any benefit by this switch because pepper itself became expensive and more profitable, then this conclusion does not work. Why? Supplies of pepper would not be as low as they are if the growers had not switched crops. Makes sense? Supposing, see, they are saying that people who switched from pepper to cocoa, they feel that we did a mistake because the pepper is expensive. But actually the switching of people from pepper to cocoa is the reason why pepper is in less supply. So C definitely makes sense. It's not about could not have foreseen. No. See, they are saying pepper से cocoa पे move करते हैं. And this movement is not good. But the reason why pepper became profitable was because of the supply demand inequality, which happened only because people switched to cocoa. Right? So C is the only one which makes sense. Yes, Aditya, I agree. But again, partly because of the bad weather, but also partly because major pepper growers have switched. So it is given. The switch is also given as a reason. Switch is also given as a reason. So C is absolutely acceptable. Right? Yep, given in the given options, definitely C is the best one. Chalo. Which of the following, if true, would most tend to weaken the force of the skeptic's argument? Whatever the argument is made by the skeptics, you have to weaken the argument. So what is the argument? Using computer techniques, researchers analyze layers of paint that lie buried beneath the surface layer of old painting. They claim, for example, that additional mountainous scenery once appeared in Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, which was later painted over. Skeptics reply to these claims, however, that X-ray examination of the Mona Lisa do not show hidden mountains. You have to say that skeptics' objection does not make sense. What are skeptics saying? That when you checked with X-rays, there was no mountain seen. So you have to say that this is wrong. So research are using computer technique. Skeptics are using X-rays. To prove that skeptics are wrong, all you need to show is that the computer technique can do something which the X-ray cannot, and that something is actually in the mountain wala layer. E clearly says that on X-ray, that relying on X-ray only has the capacity to detect lead-based white pigment in layers of the paint beneath a painting surface. So X-rays can only detect white pigment. Mountains are obviously colored using some other thing. So maybe the X-ray is not able to detect it. That does not mean that that layer does not exist. So best possible option is E. Harshit, yes, 11th was C. Did everybody get the 12th one? 12th one is definitely E. X-rays can only detect white pigment. So if X-rays are not detecting anything, it only means white pigment was not used. Something else could have been used. So the skeptics can be proven wrong. Okay. Again, which of them will most seriously weaken the argument? While Governor Verdant has been in office, the state's budget has increased by an average of 6% every year. While the previous governor was in office, the state budget increased by an average of 11.5% every year. So obviously, the austere means strict budget during Governor Verdant's term have caused the slowdown in the growth in state spending. They are saying that during Governor Verdant, the budget increased by 6%, but when the last governor was there, the budget was increasing by 11.5%, which means the Governor Verdant is very strict in spending, and that is why the budget increase is less. Now, I have to weaken this argument. First says the rate of inflation in the state averaged 10% each year during the previous governor and 3% during Verdant's term. Boss, when the inflation is 10%, you are spending 11.5. The inflation is only 3% and you are still increasing the budget by 6. Something is wrong. With a 10% inflation rate, you are still increasing the budget by only 11.5%. But when the inflation itself is only 3%, your budget is increasing at double the rate of inflation, which is very bad. So A itself is very strong enough. Do I even need to read the other options? Maybe yes. But if you take a look at them, none of them justifies it. 6% looks good compared to 11.5. But 6% rate with a 3% inflation is bad. See Aditya, inflation में there is a 10% increase, right? 100 rupees का चीज 110 रुपए में मिल रहा है, inflation. So my budget 11.5% I'm increasing. That means 10% increase के ऊपर 1.5% ही extra जा रहा है. Right? But when inflation is only 3%, 6% means 100% it is double the inflation. Verdant में double the inflation, जबकि previous governor में सिर्फ 30% more than the inflation. See, guys, you have to understand inflation and budget. Let me put the numbers again. Inflation is 3% increase. Budget is 6% increase, which means budget is increasing 100% more than the inflation. Do you get that? The rate of increase of inflation is 3%, but the budget is increasing by 6%. So budget is increasing 100% more than inflation. Now, the inflation is increasing at 10%, but the budget is increasing at only 11.5%, which means it is increasing at only 30% more than the inflation. You are spending only 30% more than the inflation. Verdant is spending 100% more than inflation, whereas the old governor was spending only 30% more than inflation. Which one is better? Now did everybody get it mathematically? 3 का डबल है 6, जबकि 11.5 is only 30% more than 10. So the old governor was only increasing budget by 30% compared to inflation, जबकि the governor Verdant is increasing his budget by 100% compared to inflation. So obviously, right? Now D. During Verdant's term in office, the state has either discontinued or begun to charge private citizens for numerous services that the state offered free to citizens during the previous governor. If they have actually cut services, then that is actually an austere measure. Cutting services is actually an austere measure. And that is what the governor Verdant's chamchas are saying. So how is that a weakening? Shubhankar, austerity means cutting down unnecessary things. D also says that he has cut down, which is exactly what they are saying. So it is in support of what they are saying, not against. Do you understand that? Right. Chalo. Which of the following statement provides support for the claim above? Right? Which of the following provides support for the claim? Federal agricultural programs aimed at benefiting one group whose livelihood depends on farming often end up harming another group. Right? Any program of the government, if it benefits one group, then that same program will harm another. Which of them supports this? First, an effort to help feed grain producers resulted in higher price for crops, but the higher prices decrease the profit of livestock producer. Cattle को खिलाने के लिए जो grow करते हैं crops, if you want to give high price to that crops, then obviously the cattle owners will get less profits. This is true. First one is true. It definitely supports the claim. Now, second one, in order to reduce crop surplus and increase prices, the growers of certain crops were paid to leave a portion of their land idle. But the reduction was not achieved because improvement in efficiency resulted in higher production on the land in use. All this is nice. Bottom line, who was harmed? It does not show who was harmed at the expense of other. 2 is not there. Third, many farm workers were put out of work when a program meant to raise the price of grains provided grain growers with the intense incentive to reduce production by giving them surplus grain from government reserves. Here, grain growers were helped, but because of that, farm workers were harmed. This also shows how one person is harmed at the expense of other. So 1 and 3, but not 2. Definitely option C. You simply have to select an option where helping one person harms the other. 1 and 3 do that. So clearly C is my answer. Okay. Which of the following conclusions can be properly drawn from the statement. Okay, I have to find a conclusion. Fine. Technological education is worsening. People between 18 and 24 who are just emerging from their formal education are more likely to be technologically illiterate than somewhat older adults. And yet, issues for public referenda will increasingly involve aspects of technology. People who are just coming out from the education system, they don't know about technology. But yet, whenever things of public referenda, that means things which require public vote, is there, more and more technology needs to be known for that. So what does it mean? If all the young people are to make informed decisions about public referenda, then many of them must learn more about technology. Definitely makes sense. Public referenda requires knowledge of technology. Young people don't know about technology. So if young people have to vote on public referenda, they will have to learn about technology. That is the obvious conclusion. A is definitely my answer. Now, it should be suggested that prospective voters should attend applied science course to get. Why should they attend applied science course? They just need to learn about technology. And applied science is not necessarily technology. Right? Attending a course and learning technology are two different things. You may attend a course but still not learn anything. Ratta maar ke paas kiya. So it's not about attending a course. It's about learning technology. So C is not my answer. C is not my answer. Attending a course does not imply that you are going to learn it. Right? For example, take any class. 50 students attend a class. Why do very few students actually get good marks? Because attending the class does not mean you are learning it. You have to actually pay attention into the class to learn it, right? So attending a class is not the suggestion. Learn technology is the suggestion. However you learn technology, does not matter how you learn it. So C is not my answer. B. Through studies of technological issue innovation should be made a required part of public and private. Again, B is not my answer. Because simply making something a part of the curriculum is no guaranteed that you are going to learn it. I want you to learn technology. Just by putting something in a curriculum does not guarantee that you will learn it. So I cannot suggest that you should put it in the curriculum. My suggestion is that you should learn it. That is required. Yes, see, Manush, just saying, first of all, how do we know that it is not a part of the curriculum? Secondly, saying that it should be a part of public and private school curriculum does not guarantee that young people will learn it. Today, lot of things are there in you guys' curriculum. But do you think everybody who is passing the course actually learns it? Making somebody attend a course or making something a part of the curriculum is not the answer. The problem is kids don't know technology. So my requirement is that kids should learn technology. Now it does not matter how they learn it. What if I don't want to learn it in college? It does not matter if you learn it from outside. My bottom line is that you should know technology. Now whether it is part of your curriculum or not makes no difference to me. Right? The problem is not about the system. The problem is that they don't know technology and they should know it. So how they know it is immaterial. Why should I make it a compulsory part of the curriculum? Do you get it? So see, my requirement is that you should know technology. My requirement is not that it should be a part of the curriculum. My need is that you should know technology. So that's what I will say. I don't want it to be part of, even if it is not part of a curriculum, does not matter. It is not a course, does not matter. What matters to me is that you should know about it. So my straightforward requirement is that kids should learn technology. How they learn it is not my headache. Do you get that, Manush? My straightforward requirement is that, see, if I'm hungry, I don't say that you should learn cooking. If I'm hungry, I will say, give me food. Right? If I'm hungry, I will not say you should know cooking. If I'm hungry, my first thing is I will say, give me food. It's like that. right? So this one is definitely A. Next one, if the factual information in the passage above is true, then which of the following can be most reliably inferred from it? Okay. In a political system with only two major parties, the entrance of a third party candidate into an election race damages the chances of only one of the two major candidates. The third party candidate always attracts some of the voters who might otherwise have voted for one of the two major candidates, but not voters who support the other candidate. Now, since a third party candidacy affects the two major candidates unequally, for reasons neither of them has any control over, the practice is unfair and should not be allowed. Okay? First option, I need an inference. First option says, if the political platform of the third party is a compromise position between that of the two major parties, the third party will draw its voters equally from the two major parties. No. It says the reasons we don't have any control over. If it is the political platform which is the reason, political platform can always be controlled, right? But they're saying that the reason is an uncontrollable one. So A cannot be my answer. B says, if before the emergence of a third party, voters were divided equally between the two major parties, neither of the major parties is likely to capture more than one half. Yes, if totally 100 voters were there, originally 50-50 voters were there, if a third party comes, 50 is not going to increase. It will come down but not go up. B definitely makes sense. B definitely makes sense. Right? If originally both the parties were going to get 50 votes each, because of a third candidate, the votes will go down. It can never go up. So no candidate in this situation can ever get more than one half of the votes. Amanbir, see, originally let us say there was party A and party B. Totally there were 100 voters. Originally 50 were going to vote for A, 50 were going to vote for B. Now if a third candidate C comes, some candidates will go over to C, some voters will vote for C, but 50 number can never increase. 50 can go down or remain the same, but this number 50 will never go up. So more than one half of the votes, more than 50 votes can never go to any candidate. So B is true. Amanbir, why not C? A third party candidates will not capture the vote of new voters who have never voted for the candidates of either. You see, if there are new voters, right, why will the third party candidate not get this? How can you derive C? Shubhankar, C तो कोई sense ही नहीं बनता है. How can you say, see, if there were two, let us say BJP and Congress, right? The new voters were not going to vote for BJP or Congress. What prevents them from voting for AAP? AAP is the third party, AAP is the third party. Why will the new voters who were previously not voting for BJP or Congress not vote for AAP? So that cannot be my answer. C तो आंसर ही नहीं है. Manush, D के लिए political stance of a third party will be more radical. Why will it be more radical? More radical means more different. Why should it be any different? More radical? What if it is less radical and people like things which are less radical? So it will be more radical than what if A and B both were extremely radical and the third party is a very low radical wala party? How does it make any difference? How does it make any difference to C? You get that? Will capture in C. A third party will capture the votes of new voters who have never voted for candidates. How do I know they will capture? What if it is a person who does not like to vote at all? New voters simply means new people who are registered to vote. New people can register themselves but never actually go to vote. So you cannot say that the third party will capture these votes. What if the third party was equally as bad as the first and second? Then the new voter will say, isko bhi vote nahi dena hai. So C cannot be true even if it says they will capture. Right? Manush, what if A and B were very radical? C is less radical and that's why people like it. So I cannot say that the third party will be the political stance will be more radical is not necessary. Why do they have to be more radical? It can be the other way, right? Yeah. Chalo. Next one. Which of the following, assuming that each is a realistic possibility, constitutes the most serious disadvantage for companies? If true, which one is a serious disadvantage for companies of using the method above for evaluating financial benefit of a new manufacturing process? Okay. Companies considering new cost-cutting manufacturing processes often compare the projected results of making the investment against the alternative of not making the investment, with cost, selling price and share of the market remaining constant. If CP is same, SP is same and market share remains same, then comparing the projected result, if you make the investment, what will be the result? If I don't make the investment, what will be the result? Companies do this to find out whether the cost-cutting manufacture process is good or not. What will be the disadvantage? Well, if competitors that do invest in a new process reduce their selling price and steal the market share, then that's a problem, right? The clear disadvantage is right now I'm only taking my own factors, but if the competitor does something radical, then I'm in a problem. And so D is my best possible answer. Definitely D is my best possible answer. Right now I'm making my decision based on internal factors. But if I do not consider external factors which are actually affecting me, then that is a disadvantage for me. My decision will be wrong. If external factors are going to harm me, which I'm not even considering, then that is obviously my disadvantage. So definitely D. Which of the following statements, if true, most strengthens the author's claim that fewer children available for adoption than people who want to adopt? Okay. There are far fewer children available for adoption than there are people who want to adopt. 2 million couples are currently waiting to adopt. But in 1982, the last year for which figures exist, there were only some 50,000 adoptions. Currently 2 million people are waiting to adopt. In 82, 50,000 adoptions took place, right? The author's claim is that the number of people who want to adopt is very large and very few children are actually available. I have to strengthen this claim. See, if the number of adoptions in a year is equal to the number of children available for adoption, then this statistic is right. Right? The statistic is saying that there are few children available for adoption and using actual adoptions for comparison. This claim will work only if whoever was available for adoption actually got adopted. So C, number of adoptions is equal to the number of children waiting. Then this claim that there are fewer children available for adoption is true. People who have to seek, now option D cannot be my answer, makes no sense. You have to go through a long process of interview and all that. How is that supporting the claim of number of children available for adoption? People have to go through a long process. It has nothing to do with the author's claim that there are less children for adoption. Right? D is totally irrelevant. Now B, number of adoptions is greater than the number of adoptions in a previous year. Does this talk about less children being available? Let us say that there are 3 million children, out of which 50,000 children were adopted. Then this is very different. There are actually 3 million children available, but only 50,000 children are getting adopted. Right? Because parents don't want the remaining children. Then if that is the case, the author's claim that less children are available is wrong. Right? If in reality there are many, when will the author's claim be right? When all the children who are available get adopted. Only then it is right that less children are available. But what if children are available but parents don't want some of them? Then the authors claim that the number of children available itself is less, is false. Shubhankar, did you understand? If 3 million children were available, but only 50,000 were good enough for adoption, then the authors claim that less children are actually available is wrong. But if only 50,000 children were available and all of them got adopted, only then the authors claim that number of children available itself is less is true. Right? Now does it make sense? So the authors claiming that 50,000 adoptions were done, and he's saying that number of children itself is less for adoption. This claim will work only if all the children got adopted. Others, did you get it? The authors claim that less children are available for adoption because only 50,000 got adopted will be true if all the children got adopted. Right. Moving ahead then. Which of the following hypothesis is best supported by the evidence? Okay. Archaeologists seeking the location of a legendary siege and destruction of a city are excavating in several possible places, including middle and lower layer of a large mound. The bottom of the middle layer contains some pieces of pottery of type 3, known to be from a later period than the time of the destruction of the city, but the lower layer does not. Right? There are multiple layers. Middle layer jo hai, there are some pieces of pottery available in it, but this layer does not have any of that pottery, and this pottery is from a period which is after the time of destruction of the city. So best what we can say that the middle layer does not represent the period. That's it. Middle layer may there are certain things which do not belong to the era of the destruction of city. So it does not represent the period of siege. As simple as that. No other option makes any sense. If evidence is not found, that means it was not there. As simple as that. And based on the same thing, the force of the evidence cited above is most seriously weakened if which of the following is true. Okay? Gerbils, small animals long native to the area, dig large burrows into which objects can fall when the burrows collapse. If there is no pottery, supposing the middle layer contains pottery, but what if the pottery was actually in the top layer, but because of this animal digging the ground, it fell? Then falling of things, A makes sense. Falling of things can confuse the evidence. That makes sense. So saying the middle layer ka evidence of pottery is actually not any evidence, because it could have been in the top layer and fallen through the hole made by the animal. So definitely, so A makes sense in this one. Manush, which one, 19th or 20th? Which one are you talking about? 20th. See, several pieces of stone from a lower layer wall have been found incorporated into the remains of a building in the middle layer. How is that any evidence? In the middle layer, there are certain things which were actually stones in the lower layer. So people could have dug it out and used it here, right? So how is that weakening any evidence? How is that an evidence of the siege? See, the evidence that they're trying to find is about the siege and destruction. This is about construction of a building. Any stone in the lower layer, if it is found in the middle layer, that's no evidence, because people who had constructed in the middle layer could have actually done it by digging from the lower layer. People could have dug the lower layer and put it in the middle layer. So that is not weakening the evidence. Right? Okay. So this is A. Right? 19th one. What's the doubt in the 19th one? What's the doubt in the 19th one? Why not A? Okay. I have to, which of the following hypothesis is best supported by the evidence? What is the evidence? Evidence is that middle layer में pottery है. Pottery was there during a time which was after the destruction, right? Okay. The lower layer, now, can I hypothesize that the lower layer contains remains of the city when the siege took place? Pottery in the middle layer was from a time which is after. From this, how do you guess that the lower layer contains the remains of the city when the siege took place? Just because pottery of a later time was found in the middle layer, how can you make the hypothesis that the lower layer contains the remains of the city? How do you imply that? Just because you found pottery in the middle layer, which is from a time after the siege, how can you make a hypothesis कि lower layer में ये मिलेगा? You can't make that. They are actually trying to find out the evidence, the location of the siege, right? So, just because the middle layer contained pottery does not mean lower layer will contain evidence of the siege. What if the siege never took place there? What if the siege took place someplace else? So, just because the middle layer में pottery मिला है does not guarantee के lower layer में city मिलेगा, because they're actually trying to find out whether the siege took place there or not. So if the siege took place somewhere else, right, then in this place lower layer में pottery नहीं, it won't get it. See, Manush, they are trying to find out evidence whether siege took place here, right? They are trying to find out whether siege took place here. Now, till now they have found out that middle layer में pottery था, which was after the time of the siege, right? So how is that going to help them conclude कि lower layer में siege होगा, lower layer में siege का evidence मिलेगा? What if the siege never took place? What if the initial guesswork itself is wrong? They're actually trying to find out whether siege took place there or not. So just because middle layer contains pottery is no guarantee that lower layer contains siege ka evidence. Yes, lower layer is an earlier period. See, let me put it like this. I'm going to show this with a diagram. See, there is site A and there is site B, right? Site A के अंदर there was the city, right? City siege happened. Lower layer पे layer बनते गए. Now, pottery was discovered after some time. Pottery wala evidence is in site B. Now, the archaeologist is digging in site B. They have found evidence in the middle layer of pottery. Does that mean if they dig even lower, they are going to get any evidence of the siege? No. Right? So, how can you say that the lower layer will contain the remains of the city? What if the siege never took place there? They're digging at the wrong place. What if they're digging at the wrong place? So, there is no guarantee. Now, did you get it? Did you get it now? Yes. Chalo. The last 10. There is a large decline in the production of oil seeds this year. The government has decided, see, if the oil seed production is low, then and only then the government will decide that we need to import it. So, first one is definitely my cause, because of which the second one is taking place. So, A is my answer. Because there is a decline in the production of oil seeds, that government has to increase the import. Right? That's pretty straightforward. Next one. The life today is too fast, demanding, and full of variety in all aspects, which leads to stress. Because of stress, more suicide. Again, A is the cause and B is the effect. No, Aditya, you don't have to assume anything else. You just have to take the statements. You don't need to assume anything else. You just need to take the statements. Right? Because of depression, obviously, depression is the cause, suicide is the effect. So again, A is my answer. Namra, that's exactly what we have to link. Stress leads to suicide. That is exactly what we have to prove. That what we have to find out. What leads to what? Depression leads to suicide, right? That is exactly what the question is all about. Assumption. See, it's very difficult for me to say whether you have to assume anything. But here, cause and effect. One is the cause. Depression is the cause. Suicide is the effect. Isn't that pretty obvious? Does a stressful situation lead to increase in number of suicide cases? Yes, it does. Yes, Aditya. But does stressful situation lead to suicides? If life is fast, demanding, and if it leads to a lot of stressful situations, then is the effect rise in number of cases in suicides? I was too hasty in saying don't assume anything. इतना तो करना पड़ेगा. उसके बिना तो क्वेश्चन ही नहीं जाएगा आगे. Right? Previous one A. 21st was A. 22nd is also A. 23rd. There is unprecedented increase in the number of young unemployed. If there are more unemployed people, then a large number of candidates submitted application against an advertisement for the post of manager issued by a bank. If the number of unemployed people is high, then obviously more people require jobs and hence more applications will be there. So large number of people will be applying. If the number of unemployed people is not high, then obviously number of applications for new jobs may not be so high. So first can be the cause and second can be the effect. Because more people are unemployed, so there are more applications for available positions. Shubhankar, does the first statement lead to the second one? Saying D, both are the effects of independent causes. But doesn't one lead to two in this case? Doesn't one lead to two? If they are totally unrelated, then I will say fine, independent. But here, because more people are unemployed, so more applications come for available jobs. Yes, correct, Aditya. If there is there a link between the two statements where one can lead to the other? If there is a link, then cause and effect, right? So you have to think. So I guess some amount of assumptions will be required. Some amount of assumptions will be required. Next, all the schools in the areas had to be kept closed, and many parents have withdrawn the children from local schools. Now, this is classically D, and this example should be very easy for us. Because of pandemic, schools are closed. Because of pandemic, parents have withdrawn children from the schools. So both are actually the effect of independent causes. Both of them are effect. 2 is the cause. Because parents have withdrawn the children, that schools have to be kept closed? No. Namra, even if many parents have withdrawn their children, why is that a reason for closing the school? Schools remain open even if 2 children are there. Even if one child is there, many schools will remain open, especially if it is a public one. Right? Public schools remain open even if one child is there. It does not say all the parents have withdrawn their children. So B, no. Namra, it does not say all parents have withdrawn. Even if one child is there, a public school will remain open, and it does not say public or private. Right? Yeah. Next, there is a high increase in the incidents of number of atrocities. The police is unable to nab the culprits committing crime against women. There is a high increase in the number of atrocities against women. This is a cause, it is not an effect. Right? Atrocities against women is not an effect, it is a cause. Right? And police not being able to catch the culprit because the police are unable to nab the culprit, something else is happening. Maybe people are dissatisfied. These are not the effects, they are technically themselves causes for something else. So both are actually independent causes. The increase in the number of atrocities is not because police are unable to capture them. We cannot say that number of atrocities is increasing because police are unable to capture them. Rise in the number of atrocities is because it starts something. Right? An atrocity against a woman leads to something. It is not the effect of something. So technically both are independent causes. Police not catching the criminals and increase in the number of atrocities is definitely a cause. But that does not lead to 2. So definitely A and D are not the answers because 1 is not an effect. And 2 does not lead to 1. So the only option left which somewhat makes sense is C. See, increase in the number of atrocities leads to something else. But police not capturing criminals is not a cause which leads to the effect of increase in number of atrocities. See, technically they can be related. So C is not a great answer. C is not a great answer. But eliminating A, B and D is the only one I'm left with. C is not a great answer. But eliminating A, B and D, it's only one I'm left with. See, A does not work as an effect. My prime thing is A does not work as an effect. And definitely A is not the cause for 1 is not the cause for 2. 1 does not work as an effect. And 1 is not the cause for 2. So using that, I'm left with nothing but C. Because there is a rise in atrocities, police is unable to capture them. It does not work. So 1 cannot be my option. Police is not able to capture the culprits. So there is an increase in the number of atrocities. Does not work. And they are not the and rise in any incident is definitely not an effect. It is usually a cause. So A, B and D get eliminated, leaving with C. Not a great answer, but the only one I get after eliminating others. It looks like one is the effect, but not a great one. The police's inability to capture the culprit does not lead to increase in the number of atrocities. Criminals don't do crimes just because police don't. Criminals don't increase the number of crimes because police don't capture them. They do crimes because they're motivated by some other reason. Inability of police is not a motivation for criminals. They continue doing if they are not caught. But increasing the atrocities, they are not motivated by the lack of police catching them. Do you get that? Not getting punished is a reason for continuing a crime, not a reason for increasing it. Motivation for a crime is not that police is not catching me. What about the very first crime? You don't know whether you're going to get caught or not, right? Atrocities against women are not done by psychopaths. Controversial. I agree, Aditya. Exam में तो मैं छूंगा नहीं. Because marking C because A, B, D are bad is not the way I like to mark my answers. Right? Chalo. We keep this for the moment. Guys, lot of guys have left. Shall I quickly show you the answers to the remaining? Right? So in case somebody wants to leave, they can. And if there are controversies, then we can discuss. I'll quickly show you the answers at least. Amanbir, leaving this in the exam with negative marking is actually not a bad option. Remember, in exam, we don't have so much time to think. So wherever you feel that it's not going to be right, best thing, if there is negative marking, don't mark it. Leave it, mark the question and move ahead. At the end, if you have time, you can always come back to it and think. But if you are not left with enough time, it's good to leave a question than to mark it when you don't have clarity of concept. Number grace mark क्या होता है? You either answer it correctly and get the answer marks, or you mark it and the answer is wrong. Negative marking होगा तो you lose marks. ये बोर्ड एग्जाम नहीं है कि अटेम्प्ट करने के मार्क्स मिलेंगे. सही आंसर का प्लस मार्क होता है, गलत आंसर का माइनस मार्क होता है. बीच में कुछ नहीं हो, अटेम्प्ट करने के मार्क्स नहीं होते. Namra. Now, if the question is wrong and if it is proven that it is wrong, they remove the question. उसका कोई grace mark नहीं होता है. And believe me, every year 20-30 questions get challenged. Not more than 2 or 3 questions are corrected. If at all they are corrected. क्वेश्चन पेपर में 20 से 30 क्वेश्चंस को चैलेंज करते हैं स्टूडेंट्स हर साल. 2 या 3 से ज्यादा कभी भी वो चेंज नहीं करते. दैट मीन्स द रिमेनिंग क्वेश्चंस दे कीप इट एज राइट. सो नेवर एवर अज्यूम के ग्रेस मार्क तो मिलता ही नहीं है, क्वेश्चन को निकाल देते हैं. अ 150 क्वेश्चन पेपर बिकम्स ऑफ 148 मार्क्स. ग्रेस मार्क कभी नहीं मिलता है वो एंट्रेंस एग्जाम्स में. चलो गाइस, क्विकली आई जस्ट गिव यू द आंसर्स फॉर द नेक्स्ट. 26th इज बी फॉर बॉम्बे. 27th is again B for Bombay. 28th is A for Ahmedabad. 29th is A for Ahmedabad. and 30th is B for Bombay. So I'm putting up the I'm putting up the answer key. If you want to check any of the last 5, you can hang around. Else we are done for the day. If there are any doubts in the last 5, we can talk about it. Else we are done for the day. Those who want can exit the session. Have a good day and stay safe. 26th one. Okay. 26th one mein shu chhe. Okay. Majority of the citizens in the locality belong to a higher income group. The sales in the local supermarket are comparatively much higher than in other localities. B says 2 is the cause. Sales are higher. So majority ना 26 का B कैसे हो सकता है? 26 का तो A होना चाहिए ना. Majority of the citizens belong to the higher income group. So the sales in the local supermarket are higher than in the other localities. If you have higher income, then I will not agree with B. I will agree with A in fact in this one. First is because they belong to higher income group, that is more sales. I would in fact go with A. If the local people belong to higher income group, then of course the sales will be higher than in other localities. So 26th ka to technically I will go with A, not with anything else. Do you agree with me? Yeah. A. Correction. This one should be A, not B. Higher income leads to higher sales. Manush, for me in reasoning, especially verbal reasoning, 60 to 70% is what generally I look at. So 60 to 70% means around, let us say you got 21 of them right. So score can be around 18, 19 plus. 18, 19 plus ka score would have been good enough. Anything higher than that is excellent. 18, 19 ka score will be fair enough out of 30, including negative marking. Including negative marking, I will take that score. Okay. Aditya, how much time per question? Not more than a minute. Verbal reasoning will take time, but still, CLAT जैसे exam में where 150 questions in 120 minutes, 1 minute is extremely high. But 1 minute is okay. Not more than that. You should be able to read fast. 40-50 seconds, fair enough. I can give you up to 60 seconds. But definitely not more than that. ठीक है? Okay. Aman B, is there essay writing in LSAT? See, till last year, LSAT used to have a simple format. There used to be 4 sections, right? You got about 35 minutes for each section. That means they will give you the first section, about 25 questions, 35 minutes. Once the first section was done, they will take away the paper, then give you the second section, then the third section. So you do not get to choose the amount of time per section. You do not get to choose which section to write first, right? But LSAT India till last year did not have any essay. So unless they have changed the format, LSAT does not have essays. Aditya, including negative 17, borderline. But ठीक है, चलो. You could have maybe एक आध silly mistake में गया होगा. CUET में गौतम, nothing specific. CUET does not have any specific. 10 mark का data interpretation आता है. That's the only thing. बाकी CUET में nothing specific. Whatever we have done so far, just the same things. Yes, Amanbir. Prep book में see, prep book of LSAT India or LSAT International, because there are 2 different LSATs. LSAT India till last year, so the prep book, are they mentioning an essay? Yeah. Yeah, Barron's LSAT, that is an international version. You have to look at LSAT India. So check the LSAT India digitally, Discover Law or something is their website, official website. LSAT India was different. LSAT International. Does HSCE have essay? Again, Sanskriti, you'll have to check the official website of IIT Madras for that.